Why is no one talking about this? Mark Lawrence is a phenomenal author, and he's been receiving a lot of praise the last few years. When his Broken Empire trilogy came out, it was groundbreaking. When his Book of the Ancestor trilogy was concluded, many considered it a masterpiece, and it was getting a lot of love on BookTube. And it seems like his library trilogy is going to trump them all. It's going to be his most popular work, and it has a lot of momentum going behind it. But no one is talking about the Impossible Times trilogy. And that's a shame. We're going to talk about it. The Impossible Times trilogy is 635 pages of sci-fi YA thriller goodness. The trilogy tells the story of Nick and his friends. Nick is a young boy genius, a prodigy in the fields of physics and math, and the series starts off with him getting a cancer diagnosis. It don't get much lower than that. The story is all very depressing until Nick encounters an individual from the future. An individual that assures him that he will, 1, survive his cancer, and 2, help discover time travel, if he follows the directions that he is given. This series is marketed as YA, but I would definitely label it as timeless YA, because adults will definitely enjoy this story. Mark Lawrence avoids a lot of the annoying tropes that are prevalent in YA, and if it wasn't for the characters being young people, I don't think it would have been labeled YA, and every subsequent novel in the series gets more grown up. Because our main protagonist is fighting cancer, one of the prevalent themes in the trilogy is the importance of escapism. Escapism in the form of entertainment, and escapism in the form of having hope for the future. Nick is given a terminal diagnosis, and he's given hope by a person from the future that he will survive this. And that's a form of escapism. That allows him to deal with the trials of his day-to-day. The other form of escapism that is prevalent in the series is playing Dungeons and Dragons. Nick is a nerd, his friends are nerds, they play D&D, and it gives them something that distracts them from the dismal realities that they are all dealing with in real life. And one thing I really like is how what they are doing in their D&D campaign overlaps with what they are doing with trying to fix a timeline, trying to solve the whole time travel thing. Time travel is very difficult to pull off well, because time travel is messy, it's complicated, especially when you get into multiverses, various timelines, infinite outcomes. It's all very hard to follow. But this trilogy is nerdy but approachable. And that is mainly because Mark Lawrence is a scientist. He understands math, he understands numbers, he understands complex systems, and he's able to make this rather difficult topic, this rather difficult plot device, very digestible for the reader. Mark Lawrence has an almost magical ability to portray melancholy and depression and hopelessness. Many authors aren't good at diving into the various aspects of these complex and negative emotions. But Nick is tackling a lot of dark things in this trilogy. Not just cancer, not just personal tragedy, not just the stress of fixing the timeline, trying to get his dream life. He's just, oftentimes, Nick is hopeless. And the world doesn't care that he's suffering. And he recognizes this because he's a boy genius. He's very much ahead of all of his peers. He's very much on a different plane than most of the people around him. And Mark Lawrence did a very good job at depicting the sense of isolation that Nick feels. On the other hand, Lawrence did a very good job at depicting how important it is to have supportive and loving friends and family, to be there for you to lean on them during your dark nights of the soul. Because I was just moved to tears several times in this trilogy when Nick would suffer some great loss, some really bad news, and then his friends were always there, and then his family was there, and they were telling him that they would be with him no matter what, and you just love to see it. I loved the character work in this series. Nick and his friends are just a lovable, supportive group of buddies, and watching their friendship grow across the years, across the decades, was incredibly moving. It brought a smile to my face, because they start off as kids, and they get into adulthood, and you just see these friendships develop and grow deeper, or you see some friendships kind of fall by the wayside. And Mark Lawrence did a very good job at portraying how friendships evolve and develop. The power of friendship is a very important trope in this series, and yeah, what's not to love about that? I want to take a few seconds to talk about catharsis, because this trilogy gave me perhaps the best feeling of catharsis I've ever gotten from any series that I've read. And I've been meditating on that. And I've been thinking about it. And here's why I think it gave me such a great feeling of catharsis. We're always asking ourselves when we're reading a story, but what if this happened? And then we finish it and we're like, but it would have been different if this happened instead. And that would have been a way more compelling, a way more interesting story. And Mark Lawrence solves that problem. Because there's various timelines and they are alluded to and they are mentioned, we kind of get the answers to those questions, like what would happen if Nick romanced this individual? What would happen if he did this? What would happen if he did that? And we're given a little bit of like notes and information about what would happen for these various other outcomes. So after I finished this trilogy, all loose ends were tied off. There was no what could have beens. And when you do a time travel story, it's very hard to give the reader a feeling of catharsis because there's always plot holes. There's always things that could have been done better. But I think Mark Lawrence finished this trilogy, tied everything off in just a perfect, masterful way. And the first thing I wanted to do when I finished this trilogy was to read the first book, because he really just does answer every question the reader would have after reading the first installment. One thing that could be said about the Impossible Times trilogy that can't be said about many series that are being written in present day is every installment in the trilogy is better than the last. One Word Kill was a few steps above just okay. Limited Wish was really good. Dispel Illusion, masterfully done. Such a great way to tie off everything in the trilogy. Mark Lawrence has received a lot of praise for his writing ability. The man can write, and there are some beautiful passages in this trilogy. Let me read a few of them to you. Truth may often be the first casualty of war, but dignity is definitely the first casualty of disease. It's always a shock when you've been hit by some calamity to see the world go about its business with perfect indifference. Hope is an essential tool in any torturer's kit bag. Hope is the thing that we will torture ourselves with after he's knocked off and gone home for the night. The stories of our lives don't behave themselves. They don't have clear beginnings, and even death isn't a clear end. We just do what we can. We take what kindness and joy we find along the way. We ride the rapids as best we're able. And these are just 4 quotes that I really like. There are dozens of passages in this trilogy that you'll want to highlight and you'll want to write down. So give this series a try if you want to read about the power of friendship, playing Dungeons and Dragons, fixing the timeline, knocking out cancer. Just don't forget to kiss the girl. This is my 4th Mark Lawrence series that I finished. It might be my favorite, but what's your favorite? Leave it in the comments below.